Hello and welcome back to the Life on the Wrist podcast. This week has been a bit slower in terms of the news for the watch industry, but there are definitely things that we're going to be talking about during this episode of the podcast. So we'll go over a couple of things that we typically go through in this podcast, and then I'm going to be trying out sort of a new segment where we kind of dive into the archives of Life on the Wrist and maybe bring you something that you can look back on either with fond memories or something that you haven't actually been able to read or see or identify on your journey in watch collecting. So if you listened to last week's podcast, you'll know that I made a fairly bold prediction in the fact that there were some leaked images of Bvlgari and MB&F, a piece that was created between two of them. They had previously created the LM Flying T Allegra, and I had hypothesized based on the pictures and the leaked pictures and articles that I had seen that perhaps they had collaborated on a new HM10 Bulldog. I couldn't have been more wrong. Well, I was close, okay? I think the overall architectural design of the watch is very, very similar to the HM10 Bulldog, but I was definitely wrong. So hopefully during this episode of the podcast, we'll be able to give you some insights into the collaboration that they did, which is a really cool piece and a nice way to mark the second collaboration between these two very cool brands. So you probably have seen, if you are on social media or saw the release video from Bvlgari and MB&F, what they have done is create something very, very interesting. So if you didn't know, the first time that that Bvlgari and MB&F collaborated was when Maximilian Busser and Fabrizio Oramassa Stigliani, the director of watchmaking creation at Bvlgari, came together and created a very interesting collaboration in 2021, which was the MB&F Bvlgari LM Flying T Allegra, which was brought a bunch of sort of the colorful world of sort of Bvlgari jewelry into MB&F legacy machines. The Flying T is sort of a ladies' watch, and the collaboration created a watch that had some incredible jewels that were added to this Flying T. A very, very beautiful piece. But the relationship between Fabrizio and Max kind of continued. And so for their second collaboration, which they released last week, they have released the Bvlgari MB&F Serpenti, which brings together an incredible bit of historical design from Bvlgari and the mechanical pieces of art that MB&F are able to create. Not only is this part of the horological machine sort of line of watches, because it doesn't sort of follow the traditional form of a legacy machine, which is what MB&F envisions they would have produced if they were sort of back in the day, what they would have produced. The horological machines are where they have some creative freedom and are able to take mechanical engineering and movement conception to a completely new level and create interesting case designs and calibers that really stand out compared to other pieces. Famously, these are called mechanical pieces of art, not just watches, because yes, they tell time, but there's so much more that goes into the engineering of these pieces that make them really, really special. Now, I'll kind of read a little bit of the excerpt from what MB&F and Bvlgari released. So, according to Fabrizio, the design aspects were a pleasure to create, and perhaps the impression that this part of the process was relatively easy, but the hundreds of sketches and dozens of 3D printed models attest otherwise. Contrary to a classic round case, which often offers only a few dimensions to experiment with, the case of the Bvlgari MB&F Serpenti could not be more complicated. Once perfected aesthetically, the design then needed to be engineered and manufactured, generating a number of further challenges. The complex curves extended beyond the metal of the case to the 5 sapphire crystals, including the multifaceted rear section, which the case not only extremely demanding to machine and finish, but also incredibly difficult to make water resistant to 30 meters. So to describe this watch a little bit more, essentially what they did is, if you don't know, the Serpenti is a snake-like design that Bvlgari has used in multiple of their watches. They have a very traditional Serpenti where you almost have this snake that wraps around your arm a few times. It's very, very popular with ladies' watches, and they recently released the first automatic caliber Serpenti a few weeks ago that we did cover on the channel. But what they basically did was create the head of a snake in a shape that is very, very similar to the HM10, but obviously looks like the head of the Serpenti design that Bvlgari uses a lot. Now, to go back to sort of what they released, inside an equally complex movement that breaks all traditional watchmaking conventions, conceived and developed in-house by MB&F. The time is displayed by revolving hours and minutes domes, which are the snake's eyes, machined from solid aluminum to make them as light as possible, requiring innovative milling processes. The mechanical reptile's brain is symbolized by the oversized 14mm flying balance wheel, firmly held in place thanks to a three-dimensional balance bridge. Flipping the machine over reveals the power reserve indicator along with some of the 310 components of the hand-finished movement. MB&F is indeed one of the few remaining brands to uphold artisanal processes and to finish components by hand, an approach only possible when creating a very limited number of watches per year, and explaining why only 6 to 8 Bvlgari MB&F Serpenti movements can be crafted per month. In addition to its obvious Serpenti origins, Fabrizio and Max are car design enthusiasts. They could not resist incorporating automotive codes into the Bvlgari and MB&F Serpenti. The case, shaped like a sleek automotive body work, a complex stepped sapphire crystal like the flaps on the rear window of a sports car, crowns that can easily be mistaken for car wheels. The apparent portions of the movement also include car engine-like components, including a grille with the famous hexagonal scale motif seen on previous Serpenti creations. When you look at this watch, it really does look like a snake. You've got an incredible sapphire display where you can see those two domes, obviously with the flying balance wheel, and then a really beautiful color that's been added obviously to the domes, and then the back where you have this another sapphire crystal, which is really, really attractive to look at. I almost find the crowns on the sides of the watches remind me of the eyes of the snake, and I think that's probably the intention. However, I have to remember that snakes actually have the eyes on the front of their faces, so the two sort of slits on the sides of the case is probably what they were going for the eyes. Obviously, they mentioned that the domes were that. It's a really sleek design. You know, at first thought, you would think that something like this would be really, really large, but I've seen some pictures of this watch on people's wrists, and it really is a very sleek design for something so intricate. That obviously is a testament to the complexity of the watch manufacturing this went through and the design process that both Bvlgari and MB&F worked on throughout the creating this specific piece. This watch is going to be launched in 3 different versions. Each of them are going to be made in 33 pieces. There's a grade 5 titanium case with blue hour and minute domes. There's an 18-karat rose gold case with green eyes for those domes, and then there's a black PVD coated stainless steel version with vibrant red eyes. In my mind, I actually love the green version and the rose gold, the 18-karat rose gold case with the green domes and accents. I find it most snake-like, if that makes any sense, and I also think the combination of rose gold and green really go very well together. This is a really beautiful piece. I love the fact that MB&F is continuing to incorporate the idea of animals into their wristwatches. This is obviously the Serpenti. Then you've got the Bulldog, which is really nice. You've got the horological machine that looks like the octopus. There's so many different versions of these these horological machines that they're producing with really interesting designs, and I really do love it. I'll leave a link in the show notes of this podcast, obviously, to MB&F's website where you can see this. I also encourage you to watch the launch video where they kind of go through designing of this piece and show some of the original sketches of this thing that they have been able to produce. It truly is, I think, another testament to how they're just doing things differently. I was a little bit skeptical when MB&F, or I guess when Chanel purchased a stake in MB&F. I was worried that they would, and I should say, I was worried that they were going to lose some of their independent thinking in a sort of avant-garde way of creating these incredible horological machines, despite the fact that they said that they would retain independence in their design thinking and the watches they would release, and that Chanel would kind of be there to support the brand and what the vision that Max had for them. And I think this is just a testament to the fact that they will continue to do things their own way. And I think this is what made me fall in love with MB&F to begin with. Obviously, the legacy machines are great, but this was what started it all, or this type of watch was what started it all. And I'm so glad that the line continues. Congratulations, MB&F, on the wonderful release. Congratulations, Bvlgari, on this collaboration. I can't wait to see this watch in person on people's wrists, and I'm sure that whoever is lucky enough to own them will enjoy them deeply. All right, so like I said, a little bit light on the watch news. I'll give you a quick look at some of the pieces that we're going to be covering on lifeonthewrist.com, on our YouTube channel as well. We've got two new pieces that we're going to be covering on the vintage side of things. Both of them are manufactured by Tudor. Both of them are very, very similar watches. I'll leave links in the show notes of this podcast for you to see pictures of them. The first is a watch that was manufactured in 1984. It's a Tudor Prince Oysterdate reference 74000. These pieces, really interestingly, over the last several months, I've had multiple people. We've sold a couple of these, I'd say, in the last couple of months, and there are so many individuals who have reached out to us saying, hey, if you ever get some of these in, please let us know, because they're really interested in these watches. And to be honest, I think it is because these watches are essentially a blank canvas. They are as simple as it gets, as classic as it gets. Stainless steel, 34 millimeter vintage watch with a steel smooth bezel, and the pieces that I have in are with these white sunburst dials. It allows you to basically put your own personality, your own take on these watches, and I think that's a really unique sort of aspect about them. The piece, as I mentioned, was manufactured in 1984. Overall, in really great condition. I love the Hulls case. Again, it allows you to personalize the watch to how you would look. The 74000 from 84 does have a little bit of patina on the dial, especially on the hours and minutes hands. The lume plots have aged nicely, and then on the applied Tudor logo, you will see a little bit of aging as well. I think in certain lights, you will also see a little bit of almost like a very, very light, dark hue that has taken over the dial a little bit. I think that's just aging over the 40 plus years that this watch has been around, and a great example that I'm very happy to be able to cover on the channel. Similar to that watch, and kind of the other the other version of these pieces is the reference 74000N, which is, I think, just another generation of these watches, and we have one of those from 1988 that sort of complements the 1984 74000. In contrast with the 1984 Tudor, this 1988 Tudor, I think, would probably be described in a little bit better condition. You don't have as much aging on the hands and Tudor logo and dial. It's a lot more, I'd say, crisp when it comes to dial condition. I'd also point out that under a loop you can see some freckled aging on the dial. This watch is very common, and I've seen it on a lot of the pieces that we've been able to showcase on the Life on the Wrist YouTube channel. Again, I think one of the quintessential references that every collector should experience, and a reference that I think a lot of people are excited about as they look to sort of build their collections. Again, stainless steel case, smooth bezel, screw down crown, date at 3 o'clock, white sunburst style that's aged nicely. It doesn't really get much better than that. Having both of these in the hand is quite interesting. You can kind of see the contrast between the two a little bit. I'd say that the cases is probably where things are a little bit different. It almost feels like the 74000N is a little bit bulkier. It's still 34 millimeters, but a little bit bulkier. It does feel a little bit larger, and probably was a way that Tudor was trying to modernize the watches that they were selling, and a really nice piece as well. Again, this light, this white sunburst style has a little bit of toasted aging, which I think is really attractive, and another quality that can age as the watch is worn and continues to age over time. So there'll be links in the show notes to both those pieces. As always, there's going to be a YouTube video and an article that we'll write for our website on both of those pieces, so stay tuned for that. Obviously, there's going to be an article and video that's going to be released tomorrow, or on Wednesday, so stay tuned for that. It's going to be one of these pieces. Okay, so to wrap up this podcast, what I wanted to actually do was go through an article, basically start this sort of new series when things are a little bit slow, where we go back into the archives of the Life on the Wrist website and pull out an article that we wrote in a video that we made that might be interesting to you to sort of go back to as you continue your journey in watches. And one of the things that I have been looking forward to is the summer auction season. I think I'm not dying because there's not a ton of vintage watch coverage right now, but I do know that the auction season allows for vintage watches to be in the spotlight a little bit, and I think that's always a fun time for me, especially considering my taste in watches. So I went back and looked at some of the auction news articles that we wrote, and I pulled one of them, which was written on May 20th, 2019, where we covered the Phillips Geneva Watch Auction number 9, and we covered 5 of our favorite lots from that specific auction. This auction was a really special one because there was lots 32 and 34, which were 2 incredible pieces from George Daniels. It was the Grand Complication and the Coaxial Anniversary watch. So this was a very big auction that showcased George Daniels, and I think was, let's probably say an earlier bit of coverage of George Daniels watches, and I think it added to the enthusiasm around the watches that were created. I picked five lots that I thought were really interesting. And most of the time when I do this, I would really focus on pieces that I thought were interesting and I would have enjoyed wearing. And I'm going to talk about 2 of them, or 2 of the pieces that I thought were quite cool and I personally would have been interested in wearing. And again, that's kind of how I have approached most things when it comes to watch auction coverage, because sure, you can cover the most interesting things or the most famous watches that are selling, or the record pieces that we're selling, but sometimes it's fun to just go through some pieces that are off the beaten path, or perhaps less covered. Because to be honest, one of the things that I like doing about with this podcast is exposing my listeners two watches that they could research and might find interesting. So anyway, I'm going on a little bit too much, but let's go through the first one. So the first watch was actually the fifth pick that I had, which was lot 166. It was a Patek Philippe reference 11. If you don't know what these pieces look like, these are sort of tank-shaped watches that have these incredibly large exploded numerals. It's a time-only piece from Patek Philippe. I think one of the most attractive time-only dress watches manufactured by the brand. They also have these very delicate sort of lugs. This specific one had an incredibly beautiful dial to it, beautiful aging. The hour markers were really, really attractive, and to me, I think showcases an interesting part of Patek Philippe collecting, which sometimes is overlooked, which is time-only Patek Philippe's. The estimate for this lot was between 20,000 and 30,000 Swiss francs. It ended up selling for above the high estimate at 45,000 Swiss francs, which is a great result, and I think showcased the interest in a watch that was in great condition and attracted a lot of buyers. And then the last lot that I'll talk about, and there'll be a link in the show notes if you want to watch our video where we go through our 5 picks. But I'll go through my second one just to cover on the channel, and that's lot number 52, which is a Rolex reference 3835 chronograph. So obviously Rolex has manufactured a ton of chronographs throughout their history, namely the Daytona that you're probably well aware of. But I think the 3835 is, in my opinion, one of the most attractive chronograph models that Rolex has ever made. This specific watch was manufactured in 1938. It's 34 millimeters in diameter, and what makes this watch really attractive to me is the fact that it has really, really cool lug design. What you have is a triple-stepped lug design where you have 3 completely separate sections of these lugs that give the lug a completely new dimension compared to, if you just had sort of a straight single lug. What was really also really cool about this watch is that it was retailed by Ronchi Milano. So you have a retail signed Rolex with an incredible lug design to it. The watch was in 18 karat yellow gold. Overall, the case was in really great condition. It had some really nice oxidation on the lugs in the case, which if you know me, I really adore that type of aging. I think it gives the watch a completely different personality and is super important if you are going to be spending a fairly decent amount of your hard-earned money on these watches, to like the condition of a case, like the condition of the dial and those types of things. It's a 3-register chronograph, so you have your obviously your chronograph hand, which is center seconds. It had the center chronograph hand. You then have the second subdial at 9 o'clock, and then you have a 30-minute counter at 3 o'clock and a 12-hour counter at 6 o'clock. It also had a telemetry scale around the outside of the dial. So it's fairly busy if you want to, put it into perspective than compared to other chronographs. But for me, quintessential vintage watch and a really great looking piece from 1938. Again, I think one of the best features of this watch is the triple stepped lug design. And I'll say personally, I've been looking for one of these because I really do love this overall design aesthetic. The watch was expected, or the estimate was between 30,000 and 50,000 Swiss francs, and it ended up selling for 47,500 Swiss francs. So right where that top estimate is. If you put that into perspective compared to Rolex Daytonas, if you are someone who can wear 34 millimeter watches, this is a wonderful place to kind of land with your collection, and something that is not typical for Rolex collectors. So a really nice piece. I hope you kind of enjoyed this sort of throwback to the archive. I encourage you to check out the link in the show notes to this article, and you can also see our video on this. It's worth going there. It's worth checking out. And I hope you enjoy watching and reading something from 2019, which is incredible to think that is, almost 6 years ago when we covered that. With that said, guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode. I think we're going to wrap it up there. As always, if you are new to the Life of the Nurse podcast, be sure to follow us and share this podcast with a friend who might be interested in a watch podcast. We release podcasts every single week where we cover the news in the watch industry. So we'd love to have you follow us if you are interested in those types of podcasts. Let me know what you think about these. First, let me know what you think about the Bvlgari MB&F Serpenti. Let me know what you think about our article from the archives. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can hit us up on our social medias or on our website. And if you wouldn't mind rating this podcast, it really does help me out. It allows me to get some feedback from you on the things you want to see as we go forward with the sixth season of the Life of the Nurse podcast. So if you wouldn't mind rating us, it really does help us out. With that said, guys, thank you so much for listening to this podcast, and until next time.